Hello again, and welcome back to Our Texas, the podcast. And today we have another truly interesting person who can give us a greater view about a subject matter that we may talk about sometimes, but oftentimes we find ourselves knowing little about, and that is mental health, and in particular, therapy. Trying to understand more about why we do things and any habits that we get into and other ways to tackle mental health. Today we have James Varnado, and he is a counselor at the Tarrant County College on the Northeast Campus, but he is also a professor emeritus in psychology at the same campus. Welcome to Our Texas, the podcast, sir.
Happy to be here.
Good, good, good. Now, just a couple of things. One of the things that I considered when we wanted to chat with you is to see if there's something special about how we approach mental health issues. And of course, when I say we, I mean African Americans in Texas. We can be concerned with people outside the state, but in particular, the kind of interest that we may have or should have. And so I know that you are a member of a number of associations nationwide, just to mention one, the Association of Forensic Psychology Association, the American Council of Forensic Psychology, is that
Yes,
that it?
psychotherapist.
Okay, psychotherapists, American Association,
Marriage family therapist.
family therapy, that sort of thing. So you have a long history, and also you've been in practice about how long?
In excess of 30 years. I like to always say that not only in practice for 30 years, because I believe in a structured approach to practice.
Yes, sir.
I would include my training as a teacher, because I started off really teaching. And from there, I developed an interest in the whole field of counseling and psychotherapy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
More in particular, I started off with dealing more specifically with people who were addicted and how that a population of addiction affected the minority community.
Yeah.
Being that I'm a minority member and really technically seeing so many minority people succumb to addictive behavior, both sexual addiction and as well as drug and alcohol abuse addiction.
Yes, sir.
And other kinds of addiction that made an impact negatively on a person's functioning in society.
Yes, sir. Where was the connection when you were teaching and students? Or was it a connection between?
Yeah, the connection is this. In a lot of Anglo communities, sort of like free association or non-directed therapy seems to be the MO, or modus operandi. But I found out with the minority community, we have to be more structured.
Okay.
So when we look at the various approaches to psychotherapy, minorities seem more amenable to the approaches that are structured. So therefore, we have teaching therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, is more apropos to in the application and really technically the facilitation in terms of direction or resolution of areas that might be difficult, mental health areas that might be difficult for people in the minority community. Because the free association kind of therapy is really technically, I hate to say this, for the affluent people who might really technically be a part of the majority community, where there's an expectation that you just simply free float, interact with the therapist, and it's considered a kind of an asset to have a therapist and talk about hey, what my feelings are all about and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Is that the kind that is typically portrayed in movies and
Yes.
TV?
Yeah, kind of fantasy type stuff. But in reality, we look at in the minority community, there's really a repulsion toward therapy. We tend to kind of veer away from therapy because therapy is maybe perceived as a kind of a weakness.
Okay.
when a person need help,
Yes, sir.
and to reach out to someone to solicit or ascertain help. It seemed to be a difficult thing for many people in the minority community. And I won't say this minority community, but people who might be disadvantaged. That may be inclusive of people who might be Anglo,
Okay.
who might live in communities that really technically don't avail themselves of therapeutic communities, professionals that might interact with them.
Perhaps a class issue?
I would say so, a class. The affluent seem to
Yes.
be more attuned to going to a therapist as opposed to the people who are disadvantaged.
Okay.
And over the years, I perceive self-maintenance or being able to master my behaviors and be functional in society is really type of a learning process that you must go through. Learning could be functionally or operationally defined as changing behaviors. As we look at in the classroom, we teach with the ultimate objective to change and behaviors and disseminate some information.
Okay.
So, and also processing the information and putting it into practice. The ultimate objective in the classroom is really technically, to get the concepts over, and really we evaluate the concepts through a test.
Yes.
And the psychotherapy is no different, especially if you're dealing with cognitive behavior therapy, which I think is more attuned. So when I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity to experience at New York University, both schools of thought. We had the directive side and the non-directive side at New York University.
Okay.
And I feel more comfortable with the directive side because sometimes the baseline has not been established for us to really, when I say us, I mean minority people, to really go to therapists and say, hey, well, I need some self-care. I need some help in terms of dealing with where I am and where I want to go in life, be it a career, or be it some obstacles in terms of my path,
Yes.
how I can become more a functional person,
Yes.
or be it dealing with difficulties in my immediate life, such as finding the appropriate mate,
Yes.
dealing with issues that I might succumb to as addiction to alcohol and drugs
Yes.
that I use to medicate and make myself feel good.
Yes.
The ultimate objective in most people is to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes we can't find our happiness by simply, our day-to-day interaction with people in society, but sometimes we have to lean on other things in drug and alcohol abuse and other forms of addiction. We tend to lean on to find some degree of happiness.
How about this? Can you describe just a few of the top issues that you've seen in your practice that you've had to handle more than all the other issues regarding mental health and counseling?
Well, I would say that I am more attracted to the more difficult kinds of populations.
Okay.
I tend to want to work with people who have serious issues with drug and alcohol abuse addiction,
Okay.
sexual addictions as well,
Yes.
and as well as helping people to find some degree of direction and being functional in society. I'm thinking that basically, for the most part, the development of the whole person with the ultimate objective of them becomes more self-actualized. And this self-actualization means that I'm acclimated to society and I'm functional and I could have meaning in life, finding meaning.
Yes.
And Viktor Frankl talked about the search for meaning. I think all populations seek to search for meaning. And meaning, really, technically, if we find meaning and we have direction, we tend to have minimum anxiety and minimum difficulties in life. So our need or desire to fulfill our basic needs and search for some kind of meaning, some significant meaning, finding a mate in our lives
Yes.
that could create comfort for us, to create a living for this mate and ourselves,
Yes.
and sometimes to procreate and populate might be, and to really technically feel good about who we are.
Okay.
And having need or desire to get to that generativity stage where we say, hey, we can look back and pull people into the mainstream, and with the hope that we are in mainstream ourselves.
Because you chose those three, was there a point at which you made a conscious decision? Was it because you were counseling perhaps several people and you kind of gravitated to it because of that instance that you chose those particular ones?
Because I think I chose those because I think that they seem to be more prevalent. We find a heavier frequency in terms of the difficulty. Yeah, alcohol, drug abuse. When we talk about drug abuse, alcohol is a drug.
Yes, yes.
Which some people just kind of separate
right.
drug from alcohol, but they all are drugs.
Okay.
And we have all other kinds of drugs. Sexual addiction is a drug.
Okay. What seems to drive people to the abuse of drugs?
The need or desire to feel good about who I am.
Is there a certain age?
No, from childhood on to adulthood, I think we all have to feel good about who we are.
Yeah.
And that objective is to feel good and find this affirmation of self and being fully functional in society.
Yeah. I was just wondering if alcohol and other drugs were more available as you become an adult, then perhaps the early years of adulthood might be the springboard to getting into the abuse.
Yeah.
What's been your practice? What's been your experience in your practice?
Yeah, well, I started off working with adolescents.
Yes, sir.
And from there, I moved to adults. I found a greater comfort level with adults because adults tend to be a little bit more disciplined in terms of being open to suggestions.
Okay.
Where, youth in many instances are going through all kinds of changes.
I see.
And youth tend to be, they tend to be more difficult because of they're inundated with so many things that they have to deal with in terms of moving toward this degree of autonomy that there's a need to move toward. Being autonomous and being fully functional,
yes, sir,
and feeling good about who we are is the ultimate objective of adolescents as well as adults.
Sure.
So I think in terms of moving toward autonomy, we need to have those skills that are appropriate that will facilitate this degree of autonomy and self-actualization.
Okay. Well, how about this? Oftentimes, you hear in media, mass media, how millennials are so different from previous generations. What's been your experience about millennials versus baby boomers versus whoever's in between, the Generation X and those kind of folks?
Well, I could tell you, I'm 72 years of age, and I consider myself part of the baby booming population. And as I interact with the millennials, I tend to say that there's a need or desire of millennials to be more immediate in terms of their need fulfillment.
More what?
Immediate.
Immediate.
They got to have it now.
Technology has been a...
I think, technology has helped to facilitate that.
Yes.
Help to really, condition people.
Okay.
Having accessibility to computers, to
click
cell
and you
phones,
get the...
click and you get the results. But they find out that basically real life is not that easy.
Okay.
And as a result of that, a lot of times difficulty evolve in their lives. as we work and move toward adolescency, which are turbulent years, we move toward really technically trying to find, during our early adulthood, find someone in our lives or significant peers or significant others to move forward with our goals and objectives, to being comfortable and to be fully self-actualized and feeling good about who we are. So finding a mate that is satisfaction and has mutuality and compatibility, mutual goals and objective and compatibility, can be difficult. But millennials want that and want it now.
Yeah.
And where I think the baby boomers, well, there was a similar kind of attitude, but I think that there's a need, a desire to realize that we have to work for it harder, because during the period of time when I was coming up, things were much more difficult, particularly for minority students or minority people. We had to work harder.
Yeah.
And it's obvious with the obstacles of prejudice that really technically is before us, and we have to break this barrier down to either go through it, over, under, around it. And my grandfather said, "Hey, don't give up. Always be persistent."
Yes.
Where in many instances I found some of my nieces and nephews they just give up so rapidly, and others that might be within their age population do the same. I mean, the stress could be overwhelming for them in terms of gaining that sense of self-actualization and autonomy. They want the instancy that comes with the need or desire to get it here or now and right away.
Do you think that part of the problems that millennials may face is that those parents, those baby boomers, did not address key issues related to race when raising their sons and daughters?
That may be a factor, because of the naivety, I think, it's so masked now. Racial difficulty and racial identity is not on the forefront. As I could reflect back to my years back in the 60s, it was there and very apparent.
Okay.
Where now the issues of race and racism is so, should I say, it's suppressed, or should I say it's more hidden or covert.
Okay.
As opposed to
Subtle.
overt. Being overt, you can see. Being covert is, I mean, you got to sort it out.
Yes.
So I always tell, when I was teaching, before I retired from teaching, I would always have a module on systematic racism and how we approached in deciphering true racism.
Yes.
Because racism can really technically prevail from both perspectives. It can prevail from the perspective of a minority who may have internal racism, the racism that really they perpetuate toward people who may look like them.
Yes.
I call self-hate.
Okay.
And the more overt external racism that may be perpetuated from others.
Okay.
We grew up as baby boomers in a separate society where millennials are more in a integrated society, or a society that's more have a greater degree of blendedness.
Even though racism may still be just up underneath.
Yes, racism is just underneath. That's why I have to. And my class, I used to teach them the tools. The tools that you may have to use to find racism, discern racism, because you can look at a person in front of you, and that characteristic may not project it in terms of this outward characteristic, but you have to look at continuous and behaviors and discern those behaviors.
Yes. Yes.
I always use as a tool to discerning racism. I use as a tool the book by Allport, The Nature of Prejudice,
Okay.
and how you discern racist behavior, be it racism internally or racism externally.
Okay.
Now, Allport was a Harvard professor who was a social psychologist. It contributed to the literature of discerning racism. Rigid two-dimensional personalities, we find the need for people desire to have a separation of people of likeness are the biggest factor in the terms of associating characteristic of racism. Rejection of who I am,
Okay.
the lack of affirmation of self
Yes.
becomes a difficult thing for millennials to deal with, because the blendedness that prevails in the present in that presence is it doesn't discern clarity in terms of looking at those behaviors that might be somewhat neutral, other than skin color.
Okay.
Personality factors.
Okay. Okay.
Like I mentioned, the rigidity,
Yes.
a two-dimensional behavior, extreme religiosity, the need or desire to have some degree of definity, as opposed to looking at life with some flexibility, the need for sameness rather than blendedness. I think that we look at the dimension of religion.
It's big in our community, being religious, being spiritual.
And that's the thing that I think, as we look at the white community, is big as well. But if you look at some of the things that are going on in today's society in terms of where the support in particular the politicians' support now, where it usually comes from,
Yes.
The evangelistic community tend to foster those rigid characteristics that are associated with racist behavior.
Yes.
And their need or desire to change, it tends to be minimum. As we look at the past 100 years, this how integrated are the churches today.
Sure. Jesse Jackson had a famous comment on a Sundays at noon is most racist most racist hour of the week or something like that.
And
because
I would affirm that most racist hour of the week, and going to church and having this need or desire of acceptance of people who are different. Even as I look at some of the evangelistic people on TBN and all of the various religious networks, there is still the lack of diversity that exists in the community. As we look at other factors such as residency, if people in the community had the tolerance that's necessary to live with each other, they wouldn't flee so much.
well,
Flee to sameness.
Are
What
you?
I said it's a characteristic. Sameness, the need or desire to be with the same,
Yes.
as opposed to with others that might be different.
Yes. Just two things. I'll come back to that in a second, but the other one was since millennials have been studied enough to indicate that they are not as thrilled about marrying, that they would prefer not to marry, they prefer to have a significant other, that sort of thing. Will that kind of, I'll label it in quotes, family dynamic, will that be a helpful thing to them, or better than having a family unit of mother, father? They have a spouse, they have children, under the guise of it's a legal institution versus an institution of convenience?
Yeah, I think that further perpetuates, and
Further perpetuates what?
it further perpetuate dysfunction,
Okay.
the lack of being able to identify with a family and having some family cohesion.
Yes, sir.
The need for openness as opposed to having a degree of blendedness among groups, be it groups, immediate dyads, triads, or groups of people needing the desire to being tolerant of differences,
Okay.
and differences within family structure, differences externally. I think that millennials suffer from that because if you look at the need or desire to work with technology, have you noticed if you are traveling, they're sticking close to the phone, sticking folks close to the community, in isolation, socialization
Yes.
skills are minimum.
Yes.
So the touch factor is
Yes.
not there. So
Okay.
factors that relate to developing skills as it relates to intimacy, and that's why intimacy is such a problem. And in terms of sexuality and,
Yes.
and the appropriateness of sexuality being within the family unit, as opposed to being wanting to be open
Yes.
and not committed. Openness with family units as opposed to this mere openness in an autonomous human being to me you're more gullible in terms of emotional difficulty because that identity and that family unit is not there.
Well, so it appears from some of the things you're saying is that issues today are quite different from issues of mental health 30, 40 years ago. That
I
sort
would
of
say
thing.
I would agree with that. It's more complex
Okay. Okay.
because you got to really sort out that total personality and zero in on the historical elements and how socialization skills have evolved over the period of time in terms of dealing with a client.
Well, how well are we doing with our community approaching good mental health? How well are we doing? Is there any research out there that suggests anything?
I would say that we are more open to it now.
Okay. What made that possible?
I'm thinking that is come with the change, and I guess with the microcosm of integration, it's been a positive thing.
Okay.
If we think about a lot of the isolation and difficulty that of a segregated society, you got emotional difficulty that's perpetuated with isolation and rejection.
Yes, sir.
As the microcosm of integration now has helped us to take on characteristics that tend to be more amenable to mental health.
Okay.
But in the past, where there was a repulsion, if we think about it, as I think about going back in my years, going to a counselor or a psychotherapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, it's a no-no, definitely no-no. I'm not crazy. I don't want to go to that. But I'll go to a preacher who has no skills in many instances,
Yes.
other than looking at the spirituality aspect of life. But life consists of more than just spirituality.
Okay.
If we live a total day-to-day spiritual context, that might be the case. But we don't deal with spirituality on a 24-hour basis. Some people might, but those are far in between.
Do you think that it's a two-edged sword? That is, using spirituality and religious beliefs has in some ways helped us, or has it all been holding us back regarding getting good mental health services?
I think the rigidity of sometimes the philosophies of some churches and some pastors, in terms of man is dominant, man is in control, the wife should be submissive to the man, as opposed to, hey, we are equal and we complement each other in terms of behavior. And sometimes, the strength of a woman is, I guess, compatible to the strength of a man. It complements each other in a sense. When a woman is weak, a man is strong. When a man is weak, a woman is strong. And that's how that cohesion or that wholeness prevails.
Okay.
With that in mind, for the most part, that's why a man and woman need each other.
Okay.
We need each other as a whole. And society as a whole need for equitability to exist. I think the church, in many instances, and the rigidity of the church, and the advocacy of woman being submissive, has been a detriment toward this need or desire for us to perpetuate equitability. Because equitability in terms of race, sex, and religiosity must prevail. We must look at each other as equal, and even though our ideas and our physiology might be different.
You mentioned drug abuse, as including alcohol abuse. You mentioned sex abuse. Help me understand actual sex abuse. Is it akin to what people used to say and identifying perhaps women as a nymphomaniac? Is that just a bygone term, or is it something more than just the having sex frequently?
Well, a woman is being nymphomania?
Well, years ago, that was the term used.
If a woman is open with her sexuality, she's considered nymphomania.
Yes.
But a man,
was not.
He just been.
He was a playboy,
man.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But is it? But I guess I want my question to be, what is sex addiction? I can understand what drug addiction is. It's just using drugs, and they're legal for the most part. Or if it's legal drug, then you use too much of it.
Yeah, I think excessive use of anything, be it drug, sex, whatever, even religiosity, can be an addiction.
Okay.
But the balance. Life is all about balance.
Yes.
Holistic development. Looking at things in moderation, as opposed to leaning on things excessively. Moderation is self-mastery. Moderation is maintenance of self. And any excessiveness, be it sexual addiction, be it religiosity, be it drug use.
Yes.
Drugs can be good if it's used to help to maintain our physiology.
Yes, sir. I can appreciate that.
But if we use it in excess, then we become dependent and is on this drugs, and it may be destructive.
But paint the picture.
Same as with sex, and the same as with religiosity. Anything in excess is an addiction.
Well, give us an example. Paint the picture of sex addiction.
Sex addiction, like I mentioned, is using it in excess.
Yes, sir.
Is someone with 24/7 this need or desire for have some degree of gratification, some degree of being involved in intimacy as it relates to sexual coitus. When there's a need for that, then there's a need maybe of affirmation of who I am in terms of my own sexuality. I call it the Teddy Pendergrass Rock Hudson syndrome on the male side. On the female side, I could not envision a female that may be labeled in excess, maybe Cleopatra or something like that. There's Cleopatra syndrome.
There's the Jezebel image that occurs in film and television, where the only reason why that character exists in the movie is to supply the sexual gratification of the main lead character. And oftentimes, black women, Latino women, and others have been utilized that way, and that's why they get this label, the Jezebel syndrome. So that's the only thing I can think of that might fit that.
Yeah, but I think that just thinking about it, and how we have to really focus in and with some degree of criticalness to even search for some categorization of women being labeled in excess in terms of a categorization.
Yeah.
Where men, having a more comfortable label if they are really technically a playboy.
Yeah.
That's a more positive image. But in reality, undergirding is insecurity.
Okay.
Because they want to affirm who I am. So I got to keep on involving myself in moments of pleasure. And just like with a woman that may be considered a nymphomania, the need, the desire. I am not happy unless I am involved in gratification excessively, sexual gratification excessively.
Yes, sir. Is that more a function of being unmarried, or is it a function at all of marital status?
Unmarried? Well,
are you more likely to see that kind of abuse, sexual addiction, in unmarried folks versus married folks?
I would tend to say that in unmarried versus married. I think that if a man has a family unit, there's a tendency, unless this family unit is dysfunctional, there's a tendency to be happier, a tendency to be more sexually satisfied.
Okay.
If the family unit is functional.
Yeah. How about the woman?
The same prevail in terms of woman inside, and if she's not abused and not considered something that she that is going to be dominated or enslaved in terms of being used as a sexual object. Because women need or desire sexually are equal to men. Sometimes we perpetuate the stereotype that men need sex more. But really, there's equitability in terms of sexuality of a man and a woman. Man and woman, they have equal sexual values and equal sexual identification in terms of desire and need fulfillment.
Yeah. Does it matter about the number of partners when one is not married? Is it a cutoff? Like, if you have one boyfriend, it's not likely to be sexual addiction. If you have several, then it's likely to be sexual addiction. Is it something like that?
Well, that might be an issue that might manifest sexual addiction if there's multiple women, multiple men. But if we look at it in the context of having a marital abode and be more in tune toward happiness within that abode, I think there is the sexual excessiveness seem to be minimum as opposed to being outside of marital abode.
Can you identify what is excessive?
I think that's maybe a relative term.
Okay.
However, we look at marital research 3 or 4 times a week, and a marriage is considered normal.
Okay.
If there's normal, behaviors if we look at each other in terms of the chores we have to do each day, and the kind of responsibility and obligation we have, 3 times a week is considered normal.
How about for those who are not married?
For those who are not married, really technically speaking, I don't have anything to measure, but I would say that being involved in a monogamous relationship and having some degree of intimacy. I'm kind of traditional in that sense that I tend to feel better about a marital relationship as opposed to being outside of a marital relationship.
Sure.
Now, when I was a bachelor for more than a decade, I found that really technically sex was more excessive because I had a need, a desire to find a partner.
Yes.
And this need, a desire to find a partner, and find a partner that was compatible personality-wise, and encompassing that personality might be sexual fulfillment. And in the process of doing that, the process of elimination might perpetuate excessive involvement in sex if I'm not critical.
It sounds as though, for example, if someone uses Oxycontin,
Oxycodone.
I think that's the term, or some other oxycodone, or some other drug like it.
Hydrocodone.
Yeah, those kind of
Another-
drugs. If it really depends on how often the person takes it to where they are abusing it, could differ from any other of those folks who are using it too much. So one person may be taking it 3 times a day, another one 7 times a day, that sort of thing. And I'm thinking that may be an analogy for the same thing regarding sex addiction.
As we look at that, we use these various narcotics like hydrocodone and Oxycontin and those to suppress pain
Yes.
and provide relief. Relief from that pain.
Yes, sir.
Sex can be placed in the same context. There's pain, emotional pain. So we use sex to resolve or reconcile this emotional pain.
I see.
The need or desire for acceptance, and the love and the be loved.
Okay.
Really sometimes when we can't find it, there's a degree of insatiability where we can't find that,
Yes.
then we tend to perpetuate excessive use of sex, or utilizing sex as a means to resolve this ambiguous perception
Okay.
of happiness.
Okay.
We are free floating out there rather than having structured goals and desires in terms of what we would like in a relationship. And a relationship in many instances can be threatening to us because we don't have specificity in terms of our goal and where we want to go with our goals and objectives in terms of having this need or desire to have someone that's in our lives, and there's monogamy, and we are instead of the multiple partners poly relationships.
Okay, just a couple of things, then maybe we can get some solutions. And that is, what has been your experience regarding folks who came in and said they've identified themselves as having the issue, whether with drugs or whether with a sex addiction? What's been is there a kind of common thread between what they discovered and that's why they came to you?
Because it came to me because they want to find happiness,
But how did they
pleasure.
How did they realize that this was that whatever the addiction was, it had gotten too advanced for them to handle on their own? What drove them to say, I need counseling? Because this is all about voluntary getting help.
When it's disruptive to their day-to-day life,
What has been the experience that you've seen with folks? They came to you because they couldn't function at work. They came to you because they constantly took drugs before they went to work or when they came home from work. They were leaving. They had several lunches during the day, but they were really sexual encounters incognito. I mean, what were some of the things that seemed to bring people to you?
the need or desire to find pleasure and meaning in life. And when they can't find pleasure and meaning in life, happiness in life, that's really technically when they come to me.
So they didn't find meaning in life in their job. Is that it?
Meaning in life is job, meaning in life in relationship,
Okay.
meaning in life in as a whole.
Okay.
When the level of anxiety is so excessive until they're disruptive in terms of day-to-day function. There's a discomfort, excessive anxiety, the disruptive behaviors. It may not be overt disruptiveness, but in terms of cohesion, lack of balance in terms of self, the lack of control in terms of their emotions,
Okay.
tend to be disruptive in their interpersonal relationships with other people.
Do people come to your office with their loved ones
Yes.
routinely?
Yeah, we have couples relationships that we deal with continuously. Over the years,
More couples than those who come on their own?
I would tend to kind of separate myself from that because I deal with more of the forensic population now, but in the past, I would say that people who are couples, they come to seek resolution, and because really I have the title of family therapist,
Yes, sir.
The ultimate objective is to seek some resolution. But sometimes they're disappointed when I say resolution may be dissolution. Because really technically we have, we fixed in terms of personalities, and there's not amenability to change.
Oh.
Then there's no resolution, but dissolution is the ultimate objective. God says, I'd say, hey, we need to dissolve this relationship, not resolve this relationship, because if you don't have amenability, you're not willing to work.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so in tune to cognitive behavior therapy. We're going to have structure activities. We're going to have concepts that we need to deal with, and how these concepts are effective in terms of making this relationship work. And we're going to have homework in terms of trying to put these things into practice. And if there's not a mutual willingness to do it, and where I could effectively evaluate it, then through assessment, be it clinical assessment or be maybe through objective measures,
Yes.
then resolution is out of the question.
Which way do couples typically come? Do they come because the affected spouse has seen the behavior and is seeking to get some help for the two of them, or the one who has the problem brings the spouse because they're seeking help?
I found that over the years, there's a lot of variance. I can't, you have to rely on our experimental psychologists, brothers who do the research that give to the clinician as to what would be a higher level of frequency.
Okay.
But if I want to speculate, it can be the multitude of them. It could be, it's hard to me to discern. But,
Okay.
This off, I can't say, well, using this statistical formula
Sure.
and applying regression analysis of variance, that perhaps there's a greater degree of significance for, for this person versus that person, this group versus that. I can't really say that at this time, but I tend to think that, if we look at females, I think they tend to be more open than men in terms of help.
Yes.
And wanting to help.
Okay.
I just think the nurturing, and people who really technically sometimes may feel a degree of oppression tend to want to seek and look for help and resolution more frequently than people who are, I would say, people who are difficult and when I say difficult, I mean this driven.
Yes.
And driven to succeed and are destructive as human beings, as opposed to those people who might be flexible and open to it.
Perhaps this question won't be to out there. What more can people do to seek better mental health services? What more can individual couples do? It's tough. See, one view I have is we used to have a telephone directory, and you could look up under the business pages and see, some counselor. But now you don't have that. So now you have the internet, Google, and other search engines, and it's a matter of trying to locate somebody who can help you. What's the best way that we can properly get mental health services when we need one? What's the best route? What should we do first?
I think the professional organizations are probably the most appropriate, and there are ratings, and each therapist may have, just like you find a doctor selects a doctor. It's like you find a product in a store, and you may look at it from a consumer's perspective. It's like in school, kids look at rate of professor.
Yes.
And not that in all cases that is valid.
Yeah.
Because it depends on the student's head, and depends on if there's really technically a significant amount of people that be representative of a true statistical population.
Yes.
Say adequate sample, should I say? Adequate sample size. Going back to my old statistical days, because you may find in rating some, not all variables are taken in consideration. Independent, professional organizations tend to predict. Even insurance companies have ratings on doctors. They have ratings on therapists as well.
Should that be a place?
The first step would be licensure.
Okay.
And appropriate credentials.
Okay.
And you look at the profession and what is the optimum level of licensure. Okay. Then from there you start looking at ratings and different organizations that may endorse them, awards, those kinds of things that you may look for.
I can see how you can go to your insurance carrier and see who they list, and then from what you're saying, look at their credentials and look at any awards or perhaps a rating that their patients give them. But for those who don't have insurance, how would you go about that?
Well, I say for those who don't have shit, that's a limitation they have to deal with. Just mere feedback from, other customers or other clients.
Asking friends and relatives, is that it?
Yeah, friends and relatives or other people who might have visited a therapist.
Yes.
We talk about nonprofits where it's not associated with a fee.
Yes.
And this free service to the community.
Yeah.
Even in church and synagogues, there are people that are fully professional.
Okay.
I would even we can't just rely on these preachers who say, "Hey, I can help you with your marriage and all that stuff like that."
Yes.
This mere cathartic interchange may not be help.
But the main reason I think I'm getting from you regarding their pastors and ministers' limitation is that they don't really have the background, the technical, the actual mental health counseling credentials. Is that it?
Yeah, I would say that. It's like in any profession. You don't want to go to an ophthalmologist to get your teeth pulled.
Okay.
Okay. You don't want to go to a dentist to have to work on a heart problem, or you work on a problem as it relates to diabetes. You want to look at the appropriate credentialing.
Okay.
Endocrinologist, for diabetes.
Yes.
For hypertension, perhaps dealing with a generalist first, and then from there, a generalist may refer you to a cardiologist.
Yes.
And the specialization in the field.
Okay.
Marriage and family therapist for people who are having coupling and family problems, problems that are directly related to that. For assessment, a psychologist, because most psychologists don't, really actually do therapy. They do assessments. Psychiatrists dispense medication, the medication that really technically have limitations.
Yes.
Because you can't, you can get addicted to medication and develop an immunity to it, and then and then you have to use an excess.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And you become addicted to finding happiness with that. So knowing that medication is temporary, knowing an assessment might be a tool to identify the problems, knowing that ongoing therapy and with a credentialed person is necessary, and the appropriate kind of feedback as it relates to your personal satisfaction.
What if a couple is religious? Should they also look? Isn't it good to look for a counselor who perhaps has a religious orientation?
You have a lot of institutions, like Texas Christian University, and you got secular institutions like UNT. The secular institution might be more neutral, where the religious institution might have a religious orientation. Then you have religious institutions that might perpetuate a neutral philosophy, but the ultimate objective is, if you want to look at spiritual association with life fulfillment.
Yes.
I would say having, if the religious background be more appropriate for one that has been credentialed from a school of divinity that has the appropriate licensure through that school of divinity. So the orientation might be spiritual, but the credentialing is equitable in terms of general licensure. Family therapists or psychologists, etc. I got friends who graduated from the Southwest Theological Seminary when it had secular disciplines. Now, C.H. Patterson would run away from there. Before that, you had guys who come out as social workers, psychologists, family therapists, and the gamut of mental health professions in all of the secular fields coming out of a religious institution, where you find that sometimes the secular fields are just limited to, a kind of a general orientation, a non-threatening and not necessarily religious oriented. But, if American Psychological Association, American Association of Family Therapists, American Counseling Association, you got institutions that are associated with religion and secular institutions that still have the general guidelines they have to follow to get the licensure. Just like doctors go to religious institutions to get medical degrees. Loma Loma.
Yes.
In California is a religious medical school. But they have to set for the medical licensure board, which is governed by the state. Fuller Institute and at Fuller University also is a religious institution. But you have to have licensure. I mean, the ultimate objective is they produce psychologists, they produce family therapists, and they produce counselors, even though they're under the umbrella or rubric of a religious institution, just like UNT would do the same, or Texas Women would do the same, but the umbrella under the umbrella of a state. But you can find people that come out of these state institutions that may have a religious orientation. But some schools specifically advocate that we're going to produce Christian counselors.
I see.
But
I see.
still, licensure
Okay.
is governed by the state.
Okay. All right.
For American Counseling Association governs licensure as it relates to the nation, and the state really picks up the local licensure in the state.
Can you leave us with one hopeful idea about how things are different for us nowadays than previously? Do you think that we are engaging in more discussions about mental health issues and solutions? Do you think that we are more open, regardless of age, to mental health help? Is there something hopeful that you see on the horizon?
Yeah, I think we're hopeful. But we go back and forth with this hopefulness.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of instances, I've seen institutions that have cut out programs that produce mental health professionals and have cut out positions that may be representative of people who may deal with mental health over the years. But I still see a gradual, incremental, development as compared to others in the past. Past decades when there's little or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to high school, they didn't have not one counselor in the high school when I went to high school.
Okay.
My brother went to high school. 10 years later, there were counselors.
Okay. Okay.
I've gone to institutions that didn't have any counselors. They used this mill advisors, and the faculty were their advisors. No counseling services.
Yes.
But now I see some microcosm of that being developed. And still there's a back and forth sometimes. Sometimes if they're going to prioritize and there have to be budget cuts, naturally
Sure.
councils are going to go first in terms of a religious institution.
How about us
in terms of a private institution.
Sure.
Or a state institution that who's having some financial exigency issues.
Sure, financial issues. What about we as a people? Are you hopeful about our outlook on mental health, on seeking it?
I'm hopeful.
What gives you hope?
My hope is that...
No. What do you see that gives you hope?
What do I see that gives me hope?
Yes, sir.
I see at least us talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I in my church, I got a guy that's over the marriage and family ministry that acts like I'm talking to a wall when I talk to him about, look here, I have some counseling interns. I'm a counseling supervisor. I have some counseling marriage family interns. They want to do volunteer work in the ministry, and just look at me and doesn't even answer me. And I get angry. He would, if he would talk to me, say, "Are you coming to the activity?" I said, "No, I have a group at that time, but I could send my intern, and maybe you can use my intern in terms of helping you." And he'll continue like, "Are you coming?" I say, "Have you considered using my intern?" And no answer. Let's look at me like a dodo. I said, "Wait a minute now, man. I know you got a college degree, you got a commission in the Army. You don't get commission unless you have a college degree. What is the issue? Are you truly a man of God and want to help people?" And you know that, having a degree in business is not going to always be helpful in terms of you running a counseling ministry. Why not, look at people in other fields? I had the same problem with Irma Johnson here as the chancellor. And she said, anybody can sit up there and talk. Because some people think counseling is all about just talk. Because thought again a change. Quite the contrary. Just like doctors have chemists, pharmacists,
Yes.
biologists to help them to understand the human body and do the experiment
Yes.
in the lab.
Yes.
Experimental and physiological psychologists help the clinical and counseling psychologists implement theories and of practice and for best practices to help with the ultimate objective of helping people deal with mental health issues, just like doctors have to deal with people with physiological issues.
Sure, sure.
So I think that we've come to an era of greater degree of sophistication, but at the same time, there's a tremendous need for more introspect. At least we are open sometimes to the idea. Quite the contrary to my analogy of this business major over marriage, family, counseling ministry who refused to allow young people who have finished up the degree and simply doing hours for an internship.
Yes.
I find that resistant.
Okay.
Resistant. And I say, are you really want the accolade of being over ministry and you have an enjoyment of eating food and cracking jokes as opposed to dealing with people who have problems there, and the ministry is all about delivering of a service to help people become whole.
Yes.
I have difficulty with that. I have difficulty with Baptist preachers who think, or some of the preachers who think, hey, come to me and I can help you with everything, even though the appropriate credentialing is not there.
Well, it doesn't sound like you're too hopeful because of these examples that you gave us.
Well, I mix some degree of pessimism with optimism.
Okay. What gives you optimism then?
Optimism is that I think that we are still putting more money in as in the past. Okay. I gave you the analogy as when I was in public school, no counselors.
Yes.
When I was in college, no counselors.
Yes. But how about we as a people, are we more amenable to, I need counseling?
We are more amenable as compared to the previous generation.
Yesterday.
Yeah, so I have optimism. I could sit down and talk to some young people and I say, perhaps we need to talk more about your issue.
Yeah.
They'll come in.
Yeah.
As opposed in the past. Oh, no, I ain't crazy.
Okay.
So I am optimistic.
Yes.
But I have mixed optimism.
Got it.
But more is, I guess, a significant. If we're looking at levels of significance.
Yes.
I have greater levels of significance as compared to in the past.
This ain't glass half full. It ain't even half full yet, right?
Well, I think it's half full.
You think it's half full?
Yeah.
Okay, well, cool.
Yeah, because I'm gonna be optimistic. It ain't gonna be half empty. I'm gonna be optimistic it's going.
Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise I would have given up the profession. Yeah.
Well, first of all, Dr. Varnado, I truly appreciate your time being here. And if there's something that maybe I missed and you think is significant to let listeners know, then I'm open to that. I just want to make sure that you give a last comment as to what we should think about, what we can think about, what we ought to think about.
I think we ought to think about being open to counseling.
Okay.
And counseling being a legitimate field, and you got a legitimate practice like any other profession.
Yes, sir.
We have to examine the repertoire and the knowledge and the seeds to understand what are human behaviors. You got to have knowledge or introspect and understand the vernacular. When I run groups, I teach them about thinking errors.
Okay.
I teach them about the terms so they can effectively communicate and implement in their behaviors and perpetuate some degree of self-management on their own when I cut them loose after so many sessions.
Okay.
Because I build a repertoire.
Yes.
If they don't build a repertoire, you don't have a baseline to grow.
Got it.
Just like you teaching in a classroom.
Yes, sir.
You got to do the fundamental, lay the fundamental groundwork.
Yes.
Defense mechanism, thinking errors, obstacles. You can't sit up there and cathartic.
Okay.
Cathartic and talkiness. That's a instrument.
Yes.
To move toward help, but there has to be a fundamental background building, a repertoire. I teach them
Yes, sir.
terms
Okay.
so they would understand what human behavior is all about and what fundamentals of human behavior I have to understand to reconcile and deal with the resolution of my problem.
Okay.
Because you can't go there and just talk.
Yeah.
Because you're talking in a vacuum. It's sort of like being insatiable.
Being what?
Insatiable. You heard about the insatiable woman?
Yes.
No satisfaction. Insatiable man?
Yeah.
No satisfaction?
Yes.
You can't get no satisfaction?
Yes, sir.
Because the repertoire is not built. Because you don't have the repertoire or the fundamental terminology to understand it, and so you could provide the appropriate introspect
Yes.
in terms of inhuman behavior in order to be effectively at reconciliation of the of the problems that manifest turbulence in human behavior.
Okay. Again, Dr. Varnado, thank you so very much for appearing on, for talking to us on our Texas podcast.
Let's not make this the last interaction, because I think we have there are a lot of contributions that blacks have made to the area of mental health that we don't know about. Such theories like Franz Fanon's, Dr. Frederick Douglass Harper, Dr. Robert Lee Williams. There are people, a significant amount. Even they have a guy from GW named Dr. Greer that has really technically done a lot of work in terms of understanding human behavior.
Okay.
We can talk about self-disclosure. Self-disclosure is fundamental, and we got to, jump over the fear. Because if we fear, then we don't grow.
Mm-hmm.
We have to reconcile our fear in terms of growth.
Okay. Okay. Well, this won't be the last time. And again, it was truly a pleasure. I thank you so very much. Again, listeners, I hope you came away with some of the things that he's pointed out, because we're always in search of better information, how we can make Texas better. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week. Bye.